So I'm sure you've seen the Steam Frame announcement. Pretty much the biggest VR news to come out in the last 6 months. But what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be really comparing it from the buyer's perspective and what the specs really mean and the comparison between the two. So starting right off, this is all by Upload VR, by the way, a really great, reputable source in the VR news. So we have Valve Steam Frame, MetaQuest 3, and then Samsung Galaxy XR. Honestly, I would not worry about the Samsung Galaxy XR. I mean, as a buyer, it's not something I think would be a very good product right now to buy. So, starting right off with one of the biggest things, resolution, because, even if you've never tried VR, I'm sure you can imagine how a pixelated screen might really mess up your immersion. Now, 2160 by 2160 versus 2064 by 2208, but they're both LCD, so they're not going to be OLED. They're not going to have super vibrant colors. But that's okay because the trade-off is a lot less cost. Now, resolution-wise, in a practical sense, those are basically the same. Honestly, Valve Steam Frame might, in practice look better because, as we'll see soon, it's a higher chip, or it's a better chip. So things will run at a high resolution, especially if you're streaming. So a lot of the times, the Quest 3 is bottlenecked by the applications themselves, and they're not going to be as crisp or as clear or as high resolution as they could be at all because the hardware itself can't handle it. So in a practical sense, though, if they're both running side by side, it's going to be very similar resolution. That's not really a big issue. Refresh rates, honestly, pretty much a similar story. Steam Frame 72 to 120, and especially if you're new to VR, and even a veteran like me, 90 hertz is all I need to get an experience where I can't tell the difference between like 90 or 120. That's just me. Some people are very, they need the 120, but that's just not me, and it's not most people. But having 90 is good. It's for both headsets, so it's not really a big issue. Then FOV is a very interesting one. You see the same horizontal FOV. I do think in practice the Steam Frame will be a little bit higher horizontal FOV, but the vertical FOV is what a lot of people say is the most important type of FOV in a VR headset, and having over 10 degrees extra in the Steam Frame is actually going to make a very noticeable difference. You will feel the FOV difference there, which is great. Now, the software is interesting because here we get into the games. Now, you might think the library on Quest has had years to evolve itself and create these exclusives you can't play anywhere else, and to an extent, you are right, there are some of those games. You can't play Asgard's Wrath 2 on this thing, you can't play Batman Arkham Shadow, and those are exclusive, really cool games. But at the same time, there are way more exclusive games on Steam. And now, if you have a PC that can run these games and a Quest 3, you're not going to get any exclusive games, obviously, by getting the Steam Frame. So you get more exclusives by having a Quest 3. But there are still so many games, VR games on Steam, and high-quality games, too. We're talking games that you can replay a bunch, and games that are like just of the best quality. Half-Life Alyx is going to be playable on this thing via streaming, and they might even port it over to the native headset itself. So software-wise, it really just depends on what you're looking for. With Meta Horizon, I'd say you have more access to maybe like more kid games, more like sort of Roblox-style games, But with Steam Frame, you're definitely having more access to higher quality, more AAA VR games. Sort of the cream of the bunch right there. Now, it is worth keeping in mind, as we'll see in a second, the Steam Frame is pretty much a streaming first headset. Now, at the same time, it is more powerful than the Quest 3 without the streaming. So it will be able to run anything the Quest 3 can, assuming it is at least somewhat optimized on Steam itself, and they're going to have a rating system to make it super easy to do this. But basically, yeah, honestly, software-wise, I'm leaning towards Steam just because from personal experience, I know so many games I want to play on PC VR or like Steam VR that I can't play on Quest 3. Now, that's assuming I can actually run them natively. Now, if you need the PC, then obviously the whole exclusive thing goes out the window and Meta sweeps it. So it just kind of, you want to look at the libraries and see what really interests you. Then let's get into the chipset, because this is all from Upload VR. I heard some outlets saying they weren't really sure what the chipset was, but they're giving us this right here. Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 versus Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2. The Steam Frame has a better GPU. Just straight up. It just has a better GPU. It's not going to be an insane difference. Probably going to be like 25-30%. But that will be noticeable. that will make a noticeable difference in running applications at different resolution and certain frame rates or whatever. So I am very curious to see just how much better that is in performance, because also if you look at the RAM is doubled on the Steam Frame versus the Quest 3. Practically, I don't know how big of a difference this is going to make in video games. I'm not sure if the RAM was really bottlenecking the Quest 3 to begin with. I do know if you're planning on running such, like, with the Steam Frame, one of the coolest things is you can play your Steam library in the headset. That's another software aspect I didn't even mention. But yeah, so if you were looking to run like flat screen applications, video games, but even if you want to use like worktop applications, especially, RAM is a big factor in that. So yeah, pretty much this is going to have significantly more power than the Quest 3, but it really comes down to how well that power is going to be utilized and optimized. Because with Quest 3, I mean, Meta has to, I mean, not as much anymore, but they still verify like the quality of how it'll run on the headset. With Steam Frame, Steam doesn't really do that because they're going to have all these past VR games that it's going to be like the Steam Deck, if you know about that. They're going to have a rating system. So it'll be like well optimized, playable, might be playable, not playable, or like, or unknown, stuff like that. So, I mean, even with the more power, if you're going to try and run something like Half-Life Alyx, you're not going to be able to do it. The only way you could do it is if Steam themselves, the developers of any of these VR games, really went in themselves and well optimized the game for the Steam Frame headset, which I would imagine a lot of developers would do, because if you're going to upload your game to Steam, I think you would imagine that a lot of the people are going to be using a Steam VR headset. So I would not be surprised if most VR games that are at least like somewhat popular on Steam VR got those ratings for the Steam Frame. And honestly, if that's something you're really concerned about, you're just not sure because you want to play it standalone, then yeah, I would probably wait a few months after the headset comes out and really just see if the games you want to play and the games that are coming out are playable on the Steam Frame natively. Now, obviously, if you stream it, which is one of the biggest features of this headset, which I'll cover in a minute, then, of course, you don't have to worry about any of that, and you could just play all the games. You could play Half-Life Alyx, you could play Blade and Sorcery, you could play anything with no hiccups whatsoever, and it would just all come down to the PC you're using. But yeah, so that's a very interesting thing. Now, let's talk about the comfort for a second. This is going to be in the strap, face pad, and weight sections of this. Quest 3, natively, it's not that comfortable. I think, for me, I need to have the Elite strap. I mean, the Elite strap with battery is obviously the best for me because you get the back weight, so it kind of balances out. But at the same time, it's kind of a heavy headset. I can't really wear it longer than a couple of hours. And I guess I wouldn't really want to because obviously the battery's going to die then. But it's sort of like, if I want to sit down, the comfort's always going to weigh me down. Like, I'm always going to be thinking about wearing the headset. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world by a long shot. It's not terrible, but it's not the most comfortable. Now, enter the Steam Frame, where a lot of people are saying this is the most comfortable VR headset they've tried, at least on the consumer scale. And this is something I'm very excited for. If you look at the weight, for example, the visor weight is the most revealing thing. That's the most revealing, because if you look at the 185 grams for the visor versus the 397 for the visor on the Quest 3, correct my math, but 185 is less than half, okay? And that's going to be a insanely noticeable thing, because the visor's on the front of your head, right here. So right here is where you're going to notice all the weight. The back weight it's a little over double that, because that's where all the battery is on the back, which is something I think Meta needs to freaking try. And it's something I'm really excited for with this headset, is to notice the comfort. This is definitely by far the more comfortable headset. If that's something that really important to you, absolutely the most comfortable headset. Especially with the Meta, you might, the Steam Frame might be like an extra $300, but if you want the actual comfort or like decent comfort on the Quest 3, you have to chip in almost $100 other just to get a strap that you could actually wear for a long time, if you ask me. And then IPD for both these headsets, it's both manual now, which is nice, if you want to adjust the interpupillary distance, I believe it stands for. Just basically saying how far your eyes are apart from each other. So it just really optimizes the headset for you. No worries there. Hand tracking on Quest 3 and no apparent hand tracking on Steam Frame. Now, let's be clear here. Quest 3 it's a general consumer headset. Steam Frame is targeting the gamer. It's a gaming headset first and foremost. That's why you'll notice they don't have color pass-through. And that's one of the Quest 3's major marketing points, is that it has these mixed reality features. This won't have that, and to that end, it also won't have hand tracking. The problems with that, is a lot of applications on Quest 3 are amazing with hand tracking and with mixed reality, and those just won't work on the Steam Frame, at least according to this list at this current date and time. And at the same time, though, it's not that big of a deal because those applications are few and far between, and realistically, if you're getting the Steam Frame, what you're using it for is gaming. And VR games with hand tracking, it's not like hardcore gaming is what I'm saying. There's a lot of great games with hand tracking, but typically I'm assuming the average buyer of the Steam Frame won't really wish they had it. So that's like something if you're interested in, but it makes it up for with this eye tracking. Eye tracking is a game changer. That's the thing that, first of all, this is a streaming first headset. Now they say that, but it's also going to work really well standalone. It's going to have similar practical specs to that of a Quest 4 with the eye tracking capabilities, because eye tracking, if you don't know, there's this thing called foveated rendering, where the game only really renders what you're looking at. So that's the way Half-Life Alyx could actually run on this thing. They'd only have to render 10% of the game at the maximum resolution, because that's where you're looking, and it's really accurate from what early testers are saying. PSVR 2 had the same thing, and it was implemented really well in a select few games. And that really had the fidelity just off the charts. It really offered more fidelity than what the PS5 should have been able to offer because of that foveated rendering. That's something I'm really excited for with this headset, and I don't think enough people are talking about that. But the other thing is, if you're streaming from your PC to your headset with Quest 3, you have to use this Wi-Fi connection or this wired connection. And the Wi-Fi connection, unless you have a top-of-the-line router and, you're not competing for your bandwidth or whatever, it's gonna be a little blurry, and it's gonna be a little laggy sometimes, and you're gonna have certain visual distortions because you just can't really process all that information coming from your computer to your headset without those visual discrepancies. The great thing about this headset, it's streaming first, it claims, so it comes with this little thumb drive out of the box, and you just plug it into a PC, and it will be able to stream on its own network with no interruptions, no hassle, no setup, I need a $300 router, I need to upgrade my Wi-Fi, none of that. None of that. It just instantly works as soon as you plug it in, and it's going to render really well. And they're going to use this thing called foveated streaming, where it will actually it'll transmit the image at the highest bit rate based off where you're looking, and that's only like 10 to 15% of the screen. So those visual glitches or discrepancies or lag you might experience with a Quest 3 streaming, you will not have. So I'm just going to say this. If you're really interested in wireless PC VR gaming, this is a no-brainer headset. There was a VR AirBridge that came out with Quest 3 a little bit a while ago that was kind of the same thing. Discontinued. Doesn't even work anymore on Windows. This is the absolute best headset for wireless PC VR gaming, and I can stand by that. If you just actually look at what it's offering, it's not even close. It's just not even close. And here we go. Yeah, pass-through, black and white, low resolution. Yeah, that's fine. They wanted to save costs is what I'm guessing. But for a lot of people, I like the color in Quest 3. Nothing against it. So just depends. IR illuminators. Very interesting. This is going to make it, I believe so, that you can pretty much just use this headset in the dark versus the Quest 3 where you can't. It'll warn you if you're not using it, which is pretty cool. I think that's really interesting. And then Wi-Fi, so with the Steam Frame, there's going to be 2 separate Wi-Fi radios is what I was hearing. One for that out-of-the-box thumb drive that can plug into your desktop or whatever, and then the other is handling everything else going on with the headset. Default store, Steam versus the Horizon store and Quest. Yeah, that's the same thing as like the UI pretty much. The cool thing about the Steam Frame is that it's basically a PC strapped to your face. So you can access, I believe, Oculus Rift games there too, which is really awesome. And you can access all these different storefronts. There's also ways, I believe, to have Android APKs, I think what it is. And those are the things that run on Quest. That's the Quest software. So you could run, hypothetically, Quest software on the Steam Frame, which is great. Unlock pin, nobody really cares about that. Data ports, this is actually interesting because there's an expansion port like under the end of the visor right here, like under right there, and that could hypothetically allow for color cameras is what they're saying. So if you want that color pass through, you'd have to pay extra, but it's a really nice thing to have. Storage is actually one of the most underrated things about this headset because I am so sick of Meta charging so much money for 256 gigabytes of storage when I could buy it for like $20 max on Amazon. And thankfully, this thing finally has a micro SD slot. Finally, a VR headset with a micro SD slot. So I would recommend, I mean, assuming there's no real speed discrepancies, which I don't know if there will be or not. I haven't really seen the storage of the headset yet. But you could just buy the 256 gigabyte version, which I'm imagining will be a lot cheaper. Buy a $20 freaking micro SD card, put that baby in, and just be smooth sailing for the whole system's life. Controllers are interesting. If you haven't seen the controllers, one has a D-pad on it, and the other has 4 buttons. So it's pretty much, you put them together, it's just a regular gaming controller. And there's obviously 2 joysticks, and there's also 2 triggers on the back. On one end, this is very good, because you can play all your Steam games just natively. You don't even need to buy another controller. It could probably just be a great experience. On the other hand, I really like the Meta controllers having 2 buttons on either side that work really well for left hand to right hand. You know, you could have the X button on the left or the A button on the right, and it feels good. It feels like there's a difference between the two, and I just don't know how that's going to play out with these controllers. Also, the 2 triggers on the back, I don't know how that's going to be utilized. I'm just very curious to see how software really utilizes that. But I do think it's a smart move because you do want to be able to play all these games and have a full-fledged controller, not like some half controller, a full-fledged controller in your VR headset. So that's pretty awesome. The biggest thing is price. Now, Upload VR confirmed it would, I think they said that it was confirmed it would cost less than the Index kit, and obviously it depends on which Index kit you bought, and I think they really ranged in prices. So my guess is this headset, given these specs and given what it's actually accomplishing, honestly, I would be surprised if it was less than $800. That would be my guess. I could see them just being like, screw it, we want to make at least some profit on this. We're going to cost $1,000. And if you look at what Meta Quest Pro cost, $1,500 a couple years ago, and that headset was just, I can't even get into the Meta Quest Pro. That headset had so many problems, especially with the Quest 3 coming out a year later for a third of the price and just better specs across the board. This has eye tracking. Eye tracking is a little pricey. This has pancake lenses, which have gone down a lot in cost. Doesn't have OLED, so that's good. It's pretty powerful. You know, it's got full-fledged controllers, which cost. Doesn't have mixed reality, which should save on some money. Honestly, yeah, $800 I feel like would be a fair price for this headset. That's where I would price it if I was Steam and I was Valve. Really competitive price. I think if you're looking at a perfect mid-range, because it's less than the Index costed, obviously, when that launched. And this is a unbelievably more capable headset. Unbelievably more capable. So, for the consumer perspective, which one do I want to buy? Well, you need to ask yourself a few questions. How much do you care about mixed reality? How much do you care about VR gaming specifically versus other use cases such as hand tracking, you know, application use, stuff like that? This actually is really good with application use, I would imagine. It's pretty much a PC. Then you need to ask yourself, what games do I want to play? You know, because Meta is going to have a different selection that you can't play on the Steam. Every Steam game you will be able to play on Meta Quest 3 via, you know, plugging in your headset to a PC or doing a wireless connection. But the thing is, it won't be as clear. It won't be as immersive. Also, this is a very immersive headset. And you want to ask yourself a big question, and especially if you're new to VR, this is something that turns away a lot of people, is comfort. It's the most underrated thing in VR in history, because comfort determines how long you're really going to be wearing the headset. And obviously battery life too, but we don't know how long the battery life is actually going to last in this headset. I would imagine it's very similar to Quest 3. But comfort is a huge aspect a lot of people don't talk about. And I think that's honestly my biggest selling point on this headset, is it's a comfortable Quest 4, including the ability to play all my Steam games and connect to a PC where I can have the best PC VR streaming experience possible in the entire world right now. There is no headset where you're going to get that experience. So I don't mean to glaze this thing. And Quest 3 is an insane deal for the value. But I'm just looking at this, and you want to ask yourself these questions. Because there's absolutely a person that should look at this list and say, I want a Quest 3 instead of this headset. Absolutely. But there's also a lot of people that need to look at this and say, hold on a second. If I want a comfortable headset, I have to chip in almost $100 more. So that's going to be like $600 for the Quest 3. And that's also, you know, I'm going to have limited storage. And also, I don't know how future-proof this thing is because Meta, I don't know how long they're going to support it. With this, Steam is going to have software updates forever on this thing. It's going to last forever. For at least, 5-10 years, which is really all you need with a headset or a hardware piece of any kind, I would find, in tech. So, you want to look at the longevity. This is a pretty longevity-focused headset, obviously with the foveated streaming, meaning you can plug in a PC. So if right now you wanted to use it as a standalone headset, and then a few years down the line, maybe games just don't run very well on this because they're all too powerful, and you can, connect it to a PC and make that investment. So, you just want to look at it. You just want to look at this and really see what you're in the market for.